It was a quiet evening at the small repair station, tucked on the edge of the colony. The sun had just begun to set, painting the sky with soft streaks of pink and orange, and a gentle breeze moved through the dusty streets. The mechanic was finishing the day's work, wiping his hands with an old rag, feeling the usual tired satisfaction that comes from fixing things for people. Machines weren't just tools here, they were lifelines, and every repair mattered. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about engines or tools. He was thinking about getting home, having a warm meal, and maybe listening to the faint hum of old music from a distant radio station dot as he locked the workshop door. Something caught his attention from the corner of his eye. At first, he thought it might be a shadow, the kind the evening sun casts long and strange. But then he noticed the tiny figure struggling on the ground near the scrapyard. It was small, pale, almost glowing against the dim light. Curiosity mixed with concern pulled him closer. As he approached, he saw it clearly, an albino feline, unlike any animal he had ever seen. Its fur was pure white, almost like soft snow, and its eyes, though half closed in pain, shone faintly with intelligence. One of its legs was bent at an odd angle, and it whimpered softly, trying to move but failing. The mechanic paused. Most people would have kept walking, thinking it was someone else's problem, or maybe even a dangerous creature. But he couldn't. Something about the fragile animal stirred a protective instinct deep inside him. He crouched down carefully, speaking in a gentle voice, more to calm himself than the creature. "Hey there. It's okay. I won't hurt you," he said. The feline's ears twitched, and it let out a soft, hesitant meow, as if understanding the words in its own way. Its breathing was shallow, and he could see it was weak, maybe even starving. Without overthinking, he scooped it up gently, feeling the tiny body trembling in his hands. The feline's eyes met his for a brief moment, and there was a strange intensity in them, a mix of fear, confusion, and something else he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was trust, or maybe it was recognition. Whatever it was, it melted any hesitation he had. He carried the creature back to the workshop, careful not to jostle its broken leg. The feline stayed silent during the walk, except for soft whimpers when he moved too quickly. Each step reminded him of how fragile life could be. Even in a world where people were used to machines breaking and planets crashing through storms once inside the workshop. He laid it down on a clean, old blanket he kept in the corner. It was the only soft spot in the room, away from tools, wires, and the cold metal floor. He examined the injured leg, trying to figure out what could have caused it. Maybe it had fallen from a height, maybe something heavier had stepped on it, or maybe it had been attacked by another animal. Whatever the cause, the leg was clearly broken, and it needed care immediately. The mechanic wasn't a trained doctor for alien creatures, but he had learned enough from fixing robotic limbs and observing the few wildlife guides that visited the colony to know what to do. He prepared a makeshift splint using some thin metal rods and soft cloth strips. The feline hissed softly when he touched the leg, but he ignored the sound, speaking calmly the whole time. "I know it hurts. I know. But this will help you." After a careful few minutes, the leg was secured, not perfectly, but stable enough to prevent further injury. Then he offered some food. It wasn't much leftover protein paste mixed with a small portion of water, but the creature sniffed cautiously and finally ate, nibbling slowly as if testing whether the human could be trusted. Each bite seemed to bring a little more life back into its body, and he could see the tension in its small frame easing. Days passed, and the mechanic dedicated himself to caring for the feline. Every morning, he would check the splint, adjust the cloths, and feed it carefully. He talked to it constantly, even though he knew it might not understand the words. Sometimes it would tilt its head, watching him with curious eyes, and other times it would simply curl up and sleep, exhausted from the pain and the stress of being alone. Slowly, the leg began to show signs of healing. The feline started putting slight weight on it, wobbling a little but managing small, careful steps. Its confidence grew, and he could see flashes of its natural agility returning. When it moved, even cautiously, he felt a quiet thrill. He hadn't just saved an animal, he had helped a creature regain its strength, and in a way, its freedom. But the more he cared for it, the more he realized something extraordinary. This wasn't a normal feline from Earth, or even the neighboring planets. Its eyes had an intelligence that went beyond instinct. Sometimes it would follow his movements in the workshop, almost predicting what he would do next. It seemed to understand danger, and when he approached with tools or strange objects, it would flinch before any threat appeared. There was a strange aura around it, almost like it was more than just an animal, though he didn't know what that meant. He simply accepted it as part of life in the outer colonies. Sometimes, extraordinary things happened, and the universe had its own way of surprising you. One night, after a particularly long day repairing a shuttle for a traveler, he found the feline sitting near the doorway, watching him silently. The workshop was quiet, except for the soft hum of the lights, and he paused, feeling the weight of the moment. It had been weeks since he found the creature, and now it looked stronger, more alert, almost proud. He couldn't explain the feeling, but there was a sense that the feline was grateful, and maybe, in its own way, aware that he had given it a second chance. He bent down slowly, reaching out a hand. The feline didn't run. Instead, it leaned slightly against his fingers, a tiny gesture, but one that made his heart swell. He smiled, feeling a rare connection to another life that transcended species, planets, and even years of solitude he had grown accustomed to. But then, as quietly as it had appeared in his life, the feline disappeared one morning. He woke to find the blanket empty and the food untouched. At first, panic gripped him. Had it been hurt again? Had it been taken? He searched the nearby streets, calling softly, but there was no sign. And then he realized maybe it had healed enough to leave, to return to the world it belonged to. The thought was bittersweet. He had grown attached, and yet he knew the wild, or wherever it came from, might be where it truly belonged. He left a small dish of water by the door, whispered a soft goodbye, and went about his day, telling himself that some acts of kindness were never meant to be recognized. Just done that years would pass, and the mechanic would continue his work, repairing machines, helping travelers, and living a quiet, honest life. The incident with the albino feline faded into memory, a gentle echo of one moment of compassion in a long life of work. He would sometimes glance at the spot where it had disappeared and wonder, without expectation, whether the little creature had survived. But he never imagined the impact it might have had, nor did he know that somewhere out there the feline had remembered him, quietly, patiently, in a way that would one day change everything. Time moved on, as it always does, in quiet, unremarkable ways. The mechanic returned to his daily routines, fixing shuttles, engines, and gadgets that travelers brought to his small workshop at the edge of the colony. Each day looked much like the one before, the same hum of machinery, the same smell of oil and metal, the same rhythm of work that filled his hands and kept his mind occupied. Life was simple, even comforting, and he liked it that way. The incident with the albino feline slowly faded into memory. Occasionally, he would recall that tiny, trembling creature and the strange glow of its eyes. But those thoughts felt distant like remembering, a dream that seemed real at the time, but had now lost its colors in the mornings. He would wake up before the sun, making tea while the faint light crept over the horizon. The colony stirred slowly, quiet at first, then gradually alive with the sound of people and machines. Children ran through the streets, merchants shouted softly to advertise their goods, and workers trudged toward the outer hangars. Everything moved in its steady, predictable pace. And yet, in the corner of the mechanic's mind, there was always a small, unacknowledged question. What had happened to that little albino feline? Did it survive? Had it returned to the wild, or had it been captured by some traveler passing through the outer borders? He never asked anyone, and no one seemed to know. The colony didn't pay much attention to rare alien animals. Life was too busy for that. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. The mechanic became well known in the colony, not for heroics or fame, but simply because people trusted him. Shuttles that others said were broken beyond repair somehow worked again after he touched them. Travelers who came and went always had stories about the quiet man with calloused hands who could fix anything. He didn't mind the recognition. He didn't seek it. He liked the solitude, the focus, the satisfaction of making things whole again. And yet, somewhere, in the quiet spaces of his life, he sometimes felt a strange emptiness, an unexplainable tug, like a memory trying to resurface, but never fully forming. Meanwhile, far beyond the colony, in the forests and cliffs near the scrapyard where the mechanic had found it, the albino feline had survived. Its leg, though healed, or a faint scar, a reminder of the pain and trust it had once placed in a human. Life had not been easy. Predators roamed freely, storms battered the cliffs, and food was scarce. But it adapted. It learned the patterns of the land, the hidden trails, the quiet places where it could rest safely without being noticed. And all the while, it remembered the human who had saved it, who had treated it with kindness when no one else would. In its way, it watched from the shadows whenever it could, learning the habits of the colony, the movements of its streets, the sounds of the mechanic's workshop. At first, the mechanic noticed nothing. Machines began to fail in small, curious ways, or sometimes they seemed to work better than expected after a repair. He shrugged these incidents off as luck, coincidences, or perhaps the natural wear and tear of metal and circuitry. The people who passed through the colony were too busy with their own lives to notice, and he didn't think much of it either. Life had its small mysteries, and he preferred the simple explanations, the things he could see and touch. Yet the feline was always there, unseen but present, learning, observing, waiting. Occasionally, he would feel it an odd sensation, like a presence just beyond his vision. A shadow that moved too fast to follow, a soft rustle in the night, a pair of glowing eyes reflecting light from the street lamp. But when he turned, there was nothing. He told himself he was imagining things. Perhaps the stress of work, the long hours, or the solitude had made him more aware of small sounds and movements. He didn't speak of it to anyone. People in the colony would have laughed. Few had patience for stories of strange creatures. Despite the distance, the bond between the mechanic and the feline remained. Time hadn't broken it. If anything, it had strengthened. The feline had grown, becoming more agile, faster, and stronger than anyone could imagine. It moved through the world with caution, yet every action seemed calculated, precise. It remembered how the mechanic had spoken to it, how he had carefully wrapped its leg, how he had provided warmth and food without asking for anything in return. The memory guided the feline's actions in subtle ways, shaping how it moved through the colony and how it observed the man who had once saved its life. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned the same soft colors as the day he had first rescued it, the mechanic stayed late in the workshop, repairing a delicate engine that had been damaged in a minor crash. The colony streets were quiet, and the only sounds were the soft hiss of tools, the occasional groan of machinery, and the distant wind moving through the sparse trees. He paused to wipe his hands, stretching tired muscles, and for a moment he imagined a white blur darting past the doorway. He frowned and shook his head, muttering, "Must be my eyes." And yet, a faint, fleeting feeling of recognition tugged at him, a sense that something familiar was nearby. Days like this became more frequent. Tools he had left broken would suddenly be neatly repaired by the time he returned from a quick walk outside. Parts misplaced in the workshop would appear exactly where he needed them. No one admitted to helping him, and yet things were always in order, always ready. The mechanic smiled quietly, thinking perhaps a neighbor had taken notice of his hard work and wanted to help. But he never saw anyone, and he never realized that it was the albino feline, now much larger, more aware, and more capable, quietly assisting him from the shadows. The mechanic's life was peaceful, but life was also full of its small anxieties. Shuttles could fail at any moment. Traders could disappear with crucial supplies. And storms came unexpectedly, sometimes bringing minor chaos to the colony. Yet, in these moments, there was always a sense of comfort that he couldn't explain, a feeling that things would work out, that no matter how small the miracle, the universe had a way of keeping him safe. And in truth, there was a reason for this comfort, a silent guardian, a reminder that the act of saving a life, no matter how small, never truly disappears. Time continued its steady march. The mechanic aged, though only slightly, his hands more calloused, his hair grayer at the temples. The memory of the albino feline became a distant thought, sometimes coming in dreams that felt more vivid than reality. He would wake with a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling of quiet hope, and shake it off as nothing more than imagination. Meanwhile, the feline had grown into a powerful, graceful creature, moving with speed and intelligence that made it nearly invisible when it chose. It had learned the ways of the colony, the patterns of life, and most importantly, it had learned patience. Years had passed, but it never forgot the mechanic. It never forgot the warmth, the care, the trust, the kindness. And so life went on. The mechanic continued his work, quietly making the lives of others better with his hands and knowledge. The feline, unseen and silent, watched over him, keeping him safe, learning his habits, protecting him in ways he would never know. The world moved forward, ordinary in appearance, but under its surface, extraordinary events were slowly aligning, waiting for the moment when past kindness and present care would collide in ways no one could predict. The connection between the human and the feline was subtle, almost invisible to the casual observer. But in the quiet moments, when the sun dipped low, when the wind whispered through the streets, when the workshop lights flickered softly in the evening, it existed. A bond that neither time nor distance could break, a promise unspoken yet deeply felt, a silent acknowledgement that life is full of surprises, and sometimes gratitude takes the most unexpected forms. And though the mechanic had long forgotten the albino feline, though he went about his days unaware of the silent watcher at his side, the creature remembered. It had not forgotten the warmth of the hands that had saved it, the soft words that had calmed it, or the gentle touch that had given it a second chance at life. That memory guided it, shaped it, and prepared it for the day when it would finally reveal itself, a moment that would change both their lives forever. Years had passed since the mechanic had first rescued the small albino feline. The memory of that fragile little creature had faded from his mind, buried beneath the ordinary rhythms of his life. He spent his days repairing shuttles, engines, and machines for the travelers and residents of the colony. His work was steady, reliable, and honest, and he liked it that way. Life was simple. Life was safe. Life had a rhythm, and he knew that rhythm by heart. But unknown to him, that small act of kindness he had offered years ago was quietly shaping the world around him in ways he could never imagine. It started with subtle signs, tiny, almost imperceptible events that could easily be dismissed. One morning, A transport shuttle that had been malfunctioning for weeks suddenly started working perfectly after he had given up hope. Another day. A pile of misaligned engine parts was found neatly organized as if someone had placed each piece exactly where it belonged. At first, the mechanic laughed quietly at himself, thinking he must be imagining things. Perhaps he had done it in his sleep, or maybe the colony's breeze had shifted objects while he wasn't looking. He shrugged it off, returning to his routine without giving it much thought. But the incidents didn't stop. They grew more frequent, more precise. Tools left in odd places would be back in their proper spots before he returned. Machines that had stubbornly refused to start somehow hummed to life with no explanation. Occasionally, he would feel the sensation of being watched, as if a pair of unseen eyes followed his every movement. Shadows flickered just beyond his vision, moving too fast or too quiet to be noticed fully. At times, he would pause, squinting, straining to see if someone was there, but there was never anyone. No human, no traveler, no animal that he could recognize. The mechanic began to notice small patterns. When he left his workshop to get supplies from the colony, he sometimes returned to find things improved without him touching them. A broken console would be repaired, wires neatly tied, and small leaks fixed. Machines he had abandoned as beyond repair suddenly ran without any intervention. He wondered if perhaps a neighboring mechanic had been sneaking in to help, but no one admitted to it. No one was seen. No explanation could be found out at first. It amused him. He would joke quietly to himself, saying, "Well, I guess the universe has a sense of humor." But over time, it became difficult to ignore. The accuracy, the intelligence, the timing of these interventions were too precise, too deliberate to be random. Something or someone was behind it. Yet the mechanic could not place it, and even if he suspected, he had no evidence. It remained a puzzle that occupied the edges of his mind while he focused on the steady work of his life. Meanwhile, far beyond the colony's streets and the mechanic's workshop, the albino feline had grown into a striking, majestic creature. It moved with grace and power, its muscles lean and strong, its senses sharp and alert. It had learned to survive in the wild, avoiding dangers, finding food, and keeping itself safe from predators. But more than survival, it had cultivated an awareness of the colony, of the humans who lived near it, and of one particular human who had once saved it from certain death. That human, the mechanic, had unknowingly left a permanent mark on its life. And the feline had never forgotten Dot. It began watching the mechanic more closely. Not from afar, but from positions where it could intervene without being seen. When storms approached, it would quietly move objects to secure the workshop. When machines faltered, it would nudge wires into place or adjust panels with precise movements. It never showed itself. It never revealed the depth of its intelligence. It simply acted, ensuring the mechanic's life remained safe and his work uninterrupted. The creature's gratitude had become a form of silent guardianship, a promise to repay kindness in ways that went unnoticed yet profoundly mattered. One day, a minor accident in the workshop reminded the mechanic that something was not quite ordinary. While adjusting a heavy engine, a loose component shifted unexpectedly, threatening to fall and crush his hand. Before he could react, a flash of white blurred past, catching the component just in time and pushing it safely aside. He jumped back, startled, heart racing, but the room was empty. The engine was steady again, and there was no explanation for what had just happened. For a moment, he felt a chill run down his spine, an odd mix of fear and wonder. Something intelligent had intervened, and it was watching him, guiding him without revealing itself. Over time, these small incidents began to build an atmosphere of quiet mystery around the workshop. Travelers passing by would sometimes remark on how strangely well-maintained the machines were, how tools always seemed to be in place, or how even the oldest engines hummed with life as if touched by magic. The mechanic smiled and nodded, claiming credit quietly, but he knew deep down that it wasn't entirely his doing. There was a presence, unseen yet unmistakable, influencing his world in subtle ways. And in the evenings, when the colony quieted and the workshop lights glowed softly against the darkening sky, he began feeling a deeper sense of comfort, a strange assurance that no matter what happened, he was protected. It was not fear that lingered in those moments, but a curious sense of safety, as if the universe itself was watching out for him. He couldn't explain it, and he didn't try. He simply allowed the feeling to exist, a quiet companion to his daily routines. Meanwhile, the feline had developed a keen understanding of human behavior. It observed not only the mechanic's actions, but also his moods, the small frustrations and joys that came with his work. When he was tired or irritated, it subtly adjusted things to ease his burden. When he seemed happy, it stayed hidden, content to let him enjoy those moments without interference. Its intelligence was extraordinary, blending instinct, memory, and observation into decisions that ensured the mechanic's life remained balanced and secure, despite the growing pattern of mysterious events. The mechanic's days remained grounded in ordinary work. He repaired engines, calibrated machines, and patched small damages for the travelers who depended on his skills. Life was simple, predictable, and honest. Yet the invisible hand guiding him added a subtle complexity he could never articulate. Something small, unseen, and intelligent was shaping the rhythm of his life in ways he did not yet understand that as time went on. The mechanic occasionally noticed fleeting glimpses of white in the periphery of his vision. A blur moving too fast to identify, a shadow darting across the edge of the doorway, a faint shimmer of movement where no one could possibly be. He thought little of it, attributing it to tired eyes or imagination. But the events continued, quietly reinforcing the idea that life is never entirely predictable. Something extraordinary existed just beyond the ordinary. Watching, waiting, and protecting, the years created a rhythm, a delicate balance between work, solitude, and the faint awareness of a presence he could not see. The mechanic went about his life without ever knowing that a small, forgotten act of kindness rescuing an injured albino feline years ago had become the seed of a bond that would endure far longer than he could imagine. It was a bond that was patient, silent, and waiting for the moment when it would no longer need to remain hidden. And the feline, now fully grown and powerful, continued to watch over him. It moved through the shadows of the colony with ease, its senses sharp, its intelligence guiding every action. It remembered every touch, every gesture, every act of care that the mechanic had shown. It had grown stronger, faster, and more aware, yet it remained patient, never revealing itself until the time was right. It was a living reminder that kindness, no matter how small or forgotten, always has consequences, and sometimes those consequences return in ways that are far greater than anyone could ever imagine. The mechanic would continue his days, unaware that he had a guardian silently walking with him, influencing his life in subtle ways. He would continue repairing machines, helping travelers, and living quietly, thinking that life was ordinary. But in truth, nothing was ordinary. Every repaired engine, every fixed tool, every small success in his workshop had been touched by the memory of one small act. One life saved, one moment of compassion that had grown into a quiet, invisible force guiding him forward. And though he could not see it, though he would never suspect the depth of the bond, the feline's presence was constant, unwavering, and powerful. It was a living testament to the truth that every kind action leaves a mark, and sometimes that mark returns when the time is right, in ways that change life forever. The years had gone by, and the mechanic had grown used to his quiet life, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the small bustle of the colony. Days passed in a predictable rhythm, each one filled with work, small conversations with travelers, and the occasional quiet evening where he would sit and watch the sky change colors. Life seemed simple, ordinary, and safe. But the ordinary could sometimes hide the extraordinary, and the mechanic was about to discover that the universe had a way of surprising him. When he least expected it, it began on an evening much like any other. The sun had begun its slow descent, bathing the workshop in golden light. The mechanic was working on repairing an old cargo hauler that had come in with a damaged steering mechanism. It was a difficult task, requiring careful adjustments and delicate calibration. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and his hands moved skillfully over the metal, tightening screws and aligning parts. He was fully focused, unaware of the shadow that had been silently watching him from just outside the workshop. Without warning, the cargo hauler, unstable from its previous damage, shifted. A panel came loose, and a heavy component began to tip, threatening to fall directly on the mechanic. He looked up just in time to see it descending and froze. His heart raced, and for a brief moment he felt certain that the falling metal would crush him. There was no time to move or react. In that instant, a flash of white blurred past him, moving faster than anything he could follow. The component was nudged aside with incredible force and precision, landing safely on the ground with a metallic clang. The mechanic jumped back, his heart pounding, staring at the empty space where the flash had appeared. There was no one there. No human, no animal, nothing. For a moment, he could hardly breathe. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it might be exhaustion or a trick of the fading light. But deep down, he knew what had just happened was real. Something intelligent had intervened, something with strength, speed, and awareness beyond anything he had ever experienced. Shaking, he looked around the workshop. Everything was in place, and the hauler was stable again. He ran his hands over the metal, testing it cautiously, his mind racing with questions. Who or what had saved him? How could it have moved with such speed and precision? He wanted to dismiss it, to convince himself that he had imagined the whole thing. But the truth was undeniable. Someone or something had acted to protect him. The incident left a lingering sense of awe and unease. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay awake on a small cot in the corner of the workshop, listening to the faint hum of the machinery and the wind whispering outside. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound sharper than usual. Part of him was terrified, part of him curious. He had lived a simple life, quiet and predictable, and suddenly there was a presence, unseen yet undeniable, altering the course of his days. Days passed, and the strange occurrences continued. Machines repaired themselves in subtle ways. Small accidents that should have caused damage never did, and objects seemed to move as if guided by an invisible hand. At first, the mechanic tried to ignore it, attributing it to luck or coincidence. But the events became too precise, too deliberate to be random. Someone or something was watching him, helping him, protecting him. Meanwhile, the albino feline, now fully grown and powerful, observed everything. Its eyes, intelligent and alert, followed the mechanic's movements, noting the rhythm of his work and his habits. It had grown stronger over the years, agile and swift, its senses sharp enough to detect danger before it arrived. The creature remembered the care and warmth it had received from the mechanic, and it had taken upon itself the responsibility to repay that kindness. Every action it took, every intervention it made, was a silent gesture of gratitude. It did not seek recognition, only the knowledge that the mechanic remained safe. One afternoon, as the mechanic worked on another shuttle, a minor explosion occurred in the fuel system. Sparks flew, and a small fire began to spread near a pile of flammable materials. Panic surged in his chest. He reached for the extinguisher, but before he could act, A white blur moved with impossible speed, knocking the burning container away from danger and stamping out the flames with precise, controlled movements. The mechanic could only stare, his mind struggling to comprehend what he had just witnessed. The fire was gone, the danger averted, and still, there was no one to be seen. From that day onward, the mechanic began to accept the presence as a part of his life, though he could not identify what it was. He would feel a shadow brushing past his vision, hear the faintest movement in the corner of his workshop, and sense that the unseen guardian was near. He never saw it directly, yet he felt a deep, unexplainable bond. There was a comfort in knowing he was not entirely alone, a reassurance that the unseen force had his back. Even if he could not understand it, the colony, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the mysterious guardian. Travelers passing by noticed how smoothly repairs were done, how rarely accidents occurred, and how machines seemed to last longer than they should. They attributed it to skill or good fortune, never suspecting that something extraordinary moved silently among them. The mechanic, for his part, never mentioned the strange occurrences. Who would believe him anyway? A grown human claiming that a mysterious creature was protecting him would sound foolish. He preferred to keep the secret to himself, letting the events remain part of the quiet mystery that had entered his life. The albino feline had grown more than just physically. It had become clever and strategic. It studied patterns of danger, predicting when accidents might occur, and intervened only when necessary. Its loyalty to the mechanic was unwavering. Every movement, every action, every calculated risk it took was to ensure that the man who had once saved it could continue his life safely. It did not interfere unnecessarily, never startling the mechanic, never revealing its presence more than it needed to. It was patient, careful, and incredibly intelligent, a silent partner in the rhythm of the mechanic's days. One evening, a violent storm approached the colony. Winds howled, and rain lashed against the workshop windows. The mechanic hurried to secure the doors and equipment, but a loose roof panel threatened to be torn away by the gusts. Before he could reach it, the feline leaped silently from the shadows, gripping the panel with strength and precision, holding it in place until the storm passed. The mechanic, drenched and exhausted, saw only the panel stabilized, the threat gone, and again wondered what force had intervened. Over time, he began to feel a strange sense of gratitude, though he did not know to whom or what. The workshop felt safer, the machines more reliable, and his life a little less vulnerable. It was as if the universe had sent a guardian, someone watching over him, ensuring that his days continued without harm. And in truth, that was exactly what had happened. The albino feline, now an impressive creature of strength and intelligence, remained in the shadows, waiting for the day when it would finally be recognized, when its presence would no longer need to remain hidden. The bond between the human and the feline had grown stronger without words. One had shown kindness, and the other had responded with loyalty, protection, and vigilance. The mechanic could not see it, could not understand it, but the actions of the creature spoke louder than any words ever could. Each narrowly avoided accident, each subtle intervention, each repaired machine was a reminder that the past had a way of returning to the present in extraordinary ways. And though he remained unaware, life was slowly preparing a moment of revelation. The years of careful observation, of quiet guardianship, were leading to a point where the mechanic would finally see, understand, and connect with the creature he had once saved. Until that moment arrived, the albino feline would continue its silent watch, a shadow in the corners of the workshop, a protector of life, a living proof that kindness, no matter how small or forgotten, never truly disappears. The years of quiet guardianship had passed, and the albino feline had grown into a magnificent, almost ethereal creature. Its fur was still as white as snow, but now it carried a strength and elegance that made it seem larger and more powerful than any ordinary animal. Its movements were silent yet precise, each step calculated, each glance full of intelligence and awareness. And for years, it had remained in the shadows, protecting the mechanic without revealing itself. But the time had come for something more. It happened on a morning that began like any other. The mechanic had opened his workshop, tools laid out neatly, machines ready for repair, and a quiet energy in the air. He was working on a shuttle that had a faulty engine cooling system, twisting wrenches and checking gauges with the usual focused calm. Yet there was a feeling he couldn't explain, a tension in the air that made him glance up more often than usual. Something was near. He could sense it, though he couldn't see it. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the storage area at the back of the workshop. The mechanic spun around, heart racing, expecting some heavy object to have fallen. But when he looked, nothing seemed out of place. He stepped cautiously toward the back, scanning for any sign of movement. Then he heard a low, soft growl, a sound unlike any he had ever heard before. It was gentle, not aggressive, but it carried a presence, a weight, a signal that something extraordinary had entered his life once again. He froze. The sound was familiar in a way he couldn't place, stirring memories long buried. Slowly he turned, and in the faint morning light filtering through the workshop windows, he saw it, a magnificent albino feline standing just beyond the doorway. Its fur glowed slightly in the soft light, its eyes intelligent and unwavering, watching him. The creature's posture was calm, almost regal, yet there was an undeniable power in the way it stood, a strength that made the mechanic step back in awe. Time seemed to pause. He stared, unable to speak at first. The years of mysterious interventions, the unexplained repairs, the narrowly avoided accidents, they all made sense in that moment. He recognized the creature, the small albino feline he had rescued years ago, now grown into a protector, a guardian, and a living reminder of a forgotten act of kindness. His chest tightened with emotion. For the first time, he realized that the bond he had unknowingly created had never been broken. The feline took a careful step forward, its gaze never leaving the mechanic. It did not rush, did not threaten, and did not act aggressively. Instead, it simply moved with confidence, as if saying, without words, "I have been here, watching over you, protecting you, remembering what you did for me." The mechanic's mind raced, filled with a mixture of disbelief, joy, and awe. He wanted to speak, to ask how, why, or even what this all meant, but words failed him. He simply stared, taking in the creature's presence, its sheer intelligence, and the quiet strength it carried. For a moment, there was silence. The workshop seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the feline approached, lowering its body slightly, a gesture of trust and recognition. It pressed its head gently against the mechanic's chest, a small but deeply meaningful act. He could feel the warmth of its body, the softness of its fur, and the strength beneath it. The connection was immediate, emotional, and overwhelming. All the years of unseen protection, all the moments he had felt something watching him, all the subtle interventions, it had all been this creature. It had all been gratitude, loyalty, and remembrance made flesh. Tears welled up in the mechanic's eyes, though he tried to blink them away. He reached out slowly, hesitantly, unsure if he was truly touching the same being he had once saved as a small, fragile creature. When his hands met the feline's fur, a wave of emotion washed over him: relief, amazement, and a profound sense of connection. It was as if the universe had returned a favor he had long forgotten, reminding him that kindness, even in its smallest forms, could ripple across time in ways that were impossible to measure. The feline circled the workshop slowly, examining its surroundings, as if confirming that everything was safe. It moved with grace, intelligence, and quiet purpose, occasionally brushing against the mechanic's legs, letting him know that it was not only present but engaged. The mechanic followed its movements, observing its elegance and power, realizing just how much it had grown. The creature was no longer the small, injured being he had once held. It was a fully capable, strong, intelligent life form. Yet it still carried the memory of his care. Days passed, and the feline remained nearby. It never demanded attention, but allowed the mechanic to become accustomed to its presence. It would watch silently from the corners of the workshop, follow him when he worked on machinery, and occasionally assist in subtle ways, nudging tools into place, helping balance heavy objects, or gently guiding materials where they were needed. The mechanic began to notice these interventions, and now, for the first time, he recognized them. Every unexplained repair, every narrowly avoided accident, every moment of quiet safety, it had all been the work of this incredible creature. The bond between them deepened. The mechanic spoke to it as he worked, telling stories of his day, joking quietly, or simply sharing his thoughts aloud. The feline listened, attentive, responding with soft purrs, movements, or gentle gestures that seemed almost conversational. They developed a rhythm, a silent understanding, a companionship that transcended words and species. In the presence of the creature, the mechanic felt safer, happier, and more alive than he had in years. The colony, of course, remained unaware of the full truth. Travelers and neighbors saw the mechanic working, his machines perfectly maintained, his workshop free of accidents. But they did not see the white feline watching from the shadows, guiding, protecting, and assisting. It remained a quiet, private miracle, a secret between the mechanic and the creature who owed its life to him. And that secrecy made the connection even more profound, more intimate, and more meaningful. Occasionally, the mechanic would pause and reflect on the years gone by. He remembered the day he had found the small, trembling feline with a broken leg, the act of care that had seemed so ordinary at the time. He realized now that this act had created something extraordinary, a bond that endured despite distance, time, and life's ordinary routines. It was a reminder that even small gestures of kindness could have far-reaching consequences, shaping the lives of others in ways we might never understand. And as the days continued, the mechanic learned to trust the feline completely. He allowed it to roam freely in and around the workshop, watching it move with intelligence and grace. He noticed the subtle ways it continued to intervene when danger appeared, always gentle, always precise, never overstepping, yet always effective. The feline had become a constant companion, a protector, and a friend, embodying loyalty in its purest form. The bond between them was no longer invisible. It was a living, breathing connection built on gratitude, care, and mutual respect. The mechanic often thought about how strange and wonderful life could be, that a chance encounter years ago, a small act of compassion, had led to this extraordinary companionship. He marveled at the intelligence of the creature, the depth of its memory, and the unwavering loyalty it had shown for so long. And in quiet moments, when the workshop was still and the colony seemed asleep, the mechanic would sit and watch the albino feline move gracefully among the tools, machines, and workbenches. He would run his hand over its soft fur, feeling the strength beneath, and realize that the world was full of miracles hidden in plain sight. The creature had returned his kindness in a way that transcended human understanding, reminding him that compassion and care are never wasted, and that every act of love, no matter how small, has the power to change lives forever. The feline's presence became a part of daily life, no longer mysterious, no longer unseen. It was a reminder that life could surprise you, that loyalty and gratitude could take forms beyond imagination, and that even the smallest act of kindness could come back to touch your life in ways you could never expect. The mechanic had learned a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his days. that the universe has a way of returning favors, often when you least expect it, and that love and care, even between different species, could create bonds that time could never break. And so, the mechanic and the albino feline continued their lives together, connected by a shared history, mutual trust, and a bond that had grown stronger with every year. Life at the colony remained ordinary in appearance, but for those two, it had become extraordinary, filled with quiet moments of wonder, protection, and companionship. Time had softened the edges of years gone by, but it had also strengthened bonds that were built on trust, care, and silent loyalty. The mechanic's workshop had become more than a place of work. It had become a home, a place where life's ordinary rhythms intertwined with extraordinary presence. The albino feline, once a fragile, trembling creature with a broken leg, now moved gracefully through the space, every step deliberate, every glance full of intelligence and awareness. Its presence was no longer mysterious. It was a part of his life, a living reminder of the power of kindness and the ways in which compassion returns to us, often when we least expect it. The mechanic had grown older, his hands more calloused, his movements a little slower than they had been in his youth. Yet, in the feline's eyes, he remained the same person who had once shown warmth, patience, and care. There was a quiet respect between them now, a mutual understanding that transcended words. Every time the mechanic worked on a machine, the feline observed, sometimes assisting subtly, nudging tools into place, or helping balance heavy components. Their teamwork had grown seamless, almost instinctive, and the workshop thrived under their combined presence. One morning, as the sun rose and bathed the workshop in soft golden light, a visitor arrived, a young traveler carrying a damaged cargo shuttle. The mechanic greeted the traveler warmly, examining the shuttle carefully. As he worked, he noticed subtle movements out of the corner of his eye. Tools shifted slightly, wires aligned more efficiently, and the shuttle seemed to respond to his touch with ease he could not explain. He glanced up and saw the albino feline perched nearby, its gaze focused and unwavering. It was watching, guiding, assisting, but never intruding. The mechanic smiled quietly, a deep sense of gratitude swelling in his chest. He understood, more fully than ever, that every life we touch has the potential to touch ours in return. Not over the days that followed, the mechanic and the feline became inseparable in both work and quiet moments. After long hours repairing engines or calibrating complex systems, he would sit quietly in the workshop, sipping water, and the feline would curl up nearby. Its warmth against his side reminded him that life's small gestures, a hand offered in kindness, a meal shared, a moment of care, have the power to create connections that endure across time and even species. He would talk to the creature about his day, about hopes, worries, or simple observations. And though it did not speak, it listened, responding with gentle movements, soft purrs, and the occasional nudge that said more than words ever could. One evening, a powerful storm swept across the colony. Lightning flashed in the distance, and wind tore across the streets, rattling shutters and shaking the workshop doors. The mechanic worked quickly to secure everything, but he felt the familiar tension of uncertainty that came with natural disasters. Heavy equipment could tip, fires could start, and shuttles could be damaged beyond repair. Then, as the storm grew stronger, the albino feline moved with remarkable speed, positioning itself to stabilize equipment, pushing objects away from danger, and using its strength and intelligence to prevent accidents. The mechanic watched, heart pounding, and realized that this loyal creature had become not just a companion, but a guardian, protecting him and everything he had built. When the storm finally passed, the mechanic stepped outside, looking at the aftermath. The colony had been battered, but his workshop and equipment remained safe. He turned to see the feline sitting calmly nearby, eyes glimmering in the soft post-storm light. A wave of emotion washed over him, relief, gratitude, and awe all at once. The years of unseen protection, subtle interventions, and quiet presence had culminated in this moment. He reached out, and the feline approached, pressing its head gently against his chest. The gesture was simple, but its meaning was profound. Trust, loyalty, and an acknowledgement of everything that had passed between them. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection. The mechanic often thought about the early days, when he had found the small, injured feline alone and struggling. He remembered the fear, the hesitation, and the tender care he had given without expecting anything in return. Now, looking at the powerful, intelligent creature that had been by his side all these years, he understood the full weight of his actions. The smallest acts of kindness can grow into the most extraordinary consequences, sometimes shaping lives in ways we cannot anticipate. Visitors to the workshop often marveled at how efficiently everything operated, how smoothly the machines worked, and how the mechanic seemed to handle challenges effortlessly. They never saw the albino feline, or if they did glimpse it fleetingly, they assumed it was an unusual pet. They could not know that every subtle intervention, every perfectly timed action, every moment of safety was the result of a bond forged years ago, one that had grown silently but powerfully over time. One afternoon, as the mechanic repaired a shuttle with a stubborn engine, he paused and looked at the feline. For a long moment, they simply observed each other, a quiet understanding passing between them. The mechanic realized that this bond, this connection, that had begun in a moment of vulnerability, had become a source of strength and comfort for both of them. It was a reminder that care and compassion, once given, never truly disappear. They linger, taking root, and return in ways that are sometimes invisible, sometimes dramatic, but always meaningful. Over time, the mechanic began to notice subtle signs of affection from the feline that went beyond loyalty or protection. It would nuzzle him when he seemed troubled, brush against his hands when he paused in thought, or lay beside him as he worked on complex repairs. These small gestures reminded him that the world, despite its challenges and uncertainties, could be filled with warmth, connection, and gratitude. It was a living lesson in empathy, patience, and the quiet power of kindness. The colony continued its daily rhythm around them, oblivious to the extraordinary relationship unfolding in the workshop. Children ran through the streets, merchants called softly to advertise their goods, and travelers moved in and out, relying on the mechanic's skill and expertise. Yet behind the ordinary, the extraordinary continued. The albino feline moved silently through the workshop, a guardian and friend, a living embodiment of loyalty, gratitude, and intelligence. It had watched over him for years, and now it was recognized, appreciated, and loved. As the years continued, the mechanic and the feline settled into a rhythm of companionship, work and quiet moments of reflection. The workshop thrived, machines ran smoothly, and the bond between human and creature grew ever stronger. The mechanic often thought about the mysterious ways life unfolds, how the smallest acts can ripple through time, and how the care we show to others, whether human, animal, or even alien, can return to us in forms we could never imagine. In the end, their story was simple yet profound. It was about kindness given freely, protection offered silently, and gratitude expressed without words. It was about the connection between two beings from entirely different worlds, brought together by chance, care, and the enduring power of memory. The mechanic had saved a life once, and in return, that life had saved his in ways he could never have anticipated. The albino feline remained a constant presence, graceful and powerful, yet gentle and affectionate. The mechanic often watched it move, thinking of how far it had come, how much it had grown, and how the bond they shared had enriched both their lives. It was a reminder that even in a world filled with machines, work, and routine, moments of true connection, silent, patient, and unwavering, are the ones that leave the deepest mark. And so, life continued at the workshop, quiet in appearance, yet extraordinary in its essence. The mechanic and the albino feline moved together through days and nights, a team built on trust, respect, and love. Machines were repaired, shuttles launched safely, and the workshop became a small sanctuary of order and care. Every action, every gesture, every moment shared between them reflected the truth that kindness, once given, never disappears. It waits, silently, patiently, until it can return in the most unexpected and remarkable ways. The story of the mechanic and the albino feline was not one of fame or recognition, but of simple, enduring connection. It was a story that proved that life's smallest acts, rescuing a trembling creature, offering care without expectation, can grow into the most powerful forces of love, protection, and gratitude. And in the quiet moments, when the sun set over the colony and the workshop glowed softly with light, the mechanic would sit and watch the feline, feeling the warmth, strength, and companionship that had grown from a single act of compassion. He knew, without a doubt, that he had been given something extraordinary, a gift returned many times over by a life he had once saved. In the end, the bond between them became a testament to the idea that life is not measured only by years or accomplishments, but by the love, care, and loyalty we share with others. The mechanic and the albino feline had discovered something far greater than themselves: the quiet, enduring power of kindness, the unbreakable strength of gratitude, and the simple joy of knowing that when we care for another being, the universe has a way of caring for us in return.